I scored a 99 percentile score on the GMAT a few years back. In 2024, the old GMAT format has been discontinued and a new GMAT format known as the GMAT Focus Edition has come into force. I am taking the GMAT once again and aiming to equal or beat my 99 percentile score. Today is day 10 of my GMAT prep. In line with the study plan that I had put together on day 7 of my GMAT prep, I am going to take my first official GMAT Focus Edition practice exam today. Over the past few days of GMAT preparation, I did identify some areas of improvement for myself, specifically on the data insight section and the verbal section. Overall, at this point, I have spent only about 3 to 4 days in preparing for the GMAT. What that means is that I'm giving the GMAT practice exam with minimal preparation. There are various reasons why I recommend that you give your first GMAT practice exam with minimal preparation. I have covered some of those reasons in the previous videos. The practice exam will help me set a benchmark for my GMAT prep and track improvements in my performance in the weeks ahead. It will also give me a directional sense of what GMAT score I should target on my final GMAT exam given the total amount of time I have to prep for it. Let's talk quickly about the practice test a little bit. In the interest of maintaining momentum, I have chosen not to spend too much time trying to identify specific features of the online question bank as far as configuring the practice test is concerned. I am choosing not to optimize things too much for today. The only decision I need to make going in is the sequence in which I want to take the 3 sections of the test. Here are the factors I am going to consider in making that decision. First, I know that the final GMAT exam only allows for a single 10-minute break across the 3 different sections of the test. This means that you can take that break after the first section or after the second one. So obviously, you're going to have to take 2 sections contiguously at the beginning or the end of the test, and you need to be able to keep answering questions for 90 minutes straight. From my performance analysis on the diagnostic test, as well as the few practice sessions I have had, I know that I am quite good with the quant section already. I expect to be able to finish that section with time remaining on the clock and with pretty good accuracy. On the verbal section, I do alright on time, but I do end up sacrificing my accuracy in my rush towards answering questions within the time limit. So this is a section where I am better off lowering my velocity a bit and trying to solve questions a little bit more deliberately so that I am able to improve my accuracy overall. That obviously requires a mindset change. I think having a few minutes of silence before this section where I can collect my thoughts and maybe meditate for 45 seconds to heighten my self-awareness will help meaningfully. On data insights, my performance has actually been pretty bad with both accuracy and velocity. So this is a section where I will need the most optimized combination of mental energy and self-awareness. One final point that goes beyond all of this is the question of what I like to call intellectual momentum. This is best understood by recollecting what you feel like every Monday morning when you go to work. Hopefully, you've not been working over the weekend, so you've had some time to disconnect from work. Maybe you went hiking, watched a movie, or whatever it is that you enjoy. Come Monday morning, let's say it is 8 a.m. and you get an unexpected email from your manager asking you specific questions about that project which you were working on Friday afternoon. Do you think your brain is going to be sharp and you will be able to answer those questions instantly? If you're a mortal like me, I'd guess probably not. You're going to need some time to get into the rhythm of things. Maybe you will open some of the files that you were working with on Friday or look at your notes or whatever. Psychologically, what you're trying to do is reactivate your memories of the topic at hand and driving your emotional state into an analytical mood where it is easier for you to think about work. In other words, you're trying to build intellectual momentum. This also matters on the GMAT because no matter when you are taking the test, it is likely that you will need to spend a few minutes at the start of the test just to get yourself into the right emotional state to be truly efficient at attacking GMAT problems. In my case, I am totally out of intellectual momentum today because I have been busy with other stuff throughout the day. Hence, I want to start my GMAT practice test with the section that I am likely to find the easiest. Like I said earlier, in my case, that is going to be the quant section. Hopefully, I will still be able to finish that section with additional time left. That would allow me to use that extra time to take some quick rest, even while I'm sitting in front of the screen before I move on to the next section. Effectively, I will be able to get some time to rest and recover without using up the 10-minute break that the GMAT allows for over the course of the entire test. Right after the quant section, I'm thinking of getting into the data insight section. As I was mentioning earlier, this is the section where I need to push on both velocity and accuracy. This makes the section incredibly tricky for me. In order to be able to push on both those fronts, I need to be feeling as sharp as possible. Even though the quant section is relatively easy for me, I know that I will have expended some mental energy in getting through it. If I take the verbal section second, I am worried that I will have exhausted most of my mental energy, and that will force me into making mistakes on the data insight section. To avoid that scenario, I'm going to take the data insight section second. After the data insight section, I will take the 10-minute break that the GMAT allows for, just so I can drink some water, stretch a little bit, maybe ponder upon the challenges of life and whatnot. After that, I will be back at my desk taking the verbal section. Before I start on the verbal section, I also want to remember to engage in the 45 seconds or so of meditation so that I am able to be a little bit more deliberate in my pacing on this section as I was describing earlier. Alright, so that is it. Quant, data insights, 10-minute break, verbal. That is the sequence in which I'm going to take the first official GMAT Focus Edition practice test. I've already set up my computer and my desk, and I have everything I need to get started on the practice exam. So let's get going. Okay, so I'm actually on an optional break. I had briefly stepped out. Before I get into the verbal section, I actually just want to share some quick updates of how I'm doing. In short, not well. The reason I say that is because I was unable to finish both the quant and the data insights sections properly. Yeah, on data insights, I got to like question number 17 and didn't even have time left to mark answers on the remaining, I think, 3 questions, 18, 19 and 20. On the quant section, also, like, I actually guessed the last 2 questions. So there, what happened with the quant section was in the initial part of the test. So I think it was question number 2 and 3, where I ended up spending a disproportionate amount of time. I basically blanked out on the formula for permutation and combination and ended up taking too much time on 2 questions. I will revisit these things once I'm done with the test, and we will get into these points in a little more detail. Alright, so this is 2.5 hours later. I have a score out of the practice exam, but I am not going to flash it on the screen yet. All I'm going to say is that it is pretty horrible. And much lower than I anticipated it would be. For now, I will just show you my overall score and my overall percentile numbers. So according to this practice exam, my overall score was 585 on a scale of 205 to 805, which is a 65th percentile score. That is well below the 99 percentile score that I'm targeting. Originally, I thought I would score somewhere in the high 600s, but I think I made a couple fatal errors during the practice exam that actually lowered my score disproportionately. With that said, let's go section by section. Quant section first. So on quant, I actually ended up getting an 81 percentile score, which by my benchmarks is actually pretty bad. When I say benchmarks, I'm referring to my educational background as well as my previous performance on the GMAT. There are 21 questions on this section. I ran out of time on the quant section of the practice exam by the time I was done with question number 19. Clearly, I was overconfident, and the GMAT practice exam has given me a well-deserved attitude adjustment. Here is what actually happened. I ran into trouble with this section right at the beginning by losing a sense of time with questions 2 and 3. So if you just have a look at my response time on a per question grain, you see that I ended up spending almost 11 minutes between these two questions. That is about 7 to 8 minutes of time wasted right there, which is very hard to recover from. In fact, given the difficulty I was having with these questions, I blanked out so bad that I ended up pausing the practice exam just to pull myself together. I could feel the confidence draining out of me right at that point. In fact, I was even trying to solve question number 3 throughout the pause. Clearly, that was me being dishonest with myself. I was just a little too overwhelmed at that point because I was stuck on 2 questions so early on within that section, and my natural reaction was to actually hold my ground and go, I'm not moving forward without answering this question right. That is a behavior which will hurt you on the GMAT, and my performance on the practice exam is a great demonstration of that. After spending a few minutes like that, I was finally able to pull myself together and remind myself that the intention of the practice exam is just to get a realistic baseline of where you stand today. The score is not a representation of what your final GMAT score is going to look like. With that, I resumed the practice exam and then went all the way through to the end of the quant section. Because I had lost so much time at the start, by the time I reached question 20, I probably had less than 2 minutes left on this section. Fortunately, I noticed the clock, and seeing that I was running out of time, I just arbitrarily selected a couple options on question number 20 and 21 respectively. You will also see that in my response time here, where you can see that I spent some time on question number 20, but then on question number 21, I just within a matter of 13 seconds selected an option and moved on. There is one very minor point I want to make about the test experience itself. I was a little irritated by the fact that the test interface requires you to make 3 clicks to answer each question. So imagine you have a pen in hand, you're trying to write things down on a notebook, and once you arrive at an answer, you use your mouse to select an answer, and then you click on the next button, and then there is a confirmation window in the center of the screen where you need to click on a confirm button. That is 3 different clicks at 3 different points of the screen that you need to click after every single question. Personally, I found that very annoying, but I also know that there is nothing I can do to change that. So what I need to work on is accepting that and ensuring that it does not affect me emotionally during the test. To be fair, because my performance on this section was actually pretty horrible compared to what I was expecting, my annoyance over this minor issue just felt a little more magnified. Overall, the terrible score on this section is actually entirely my responsibility. I was overconfident at the start. I became stuck on 2 questions where I should not have spent as much time as I did, and at the end my score could have been a little better than what it turned out to be. Because technically I did finish the section in the sense that I answered all the questions. GMAT did not impose a penalty on me for this section. But of course, it looks like Murphy's Law was in play throughout my practice exam, because that is precisely the mistake I made on the data insight section. As I had said at the start, I fully expected to run out of time on this section. If you look at my final scores, my percentile score on data insights is actually pretty abysmal. I ended up with a 20th percentile score, which is pretty much on the other end of the score spectrum versus the 99 percentile score that I am gunning for. The reason why my score on this section looks worse than it is because of the penalty that GMAT imposes when you do not answer all questions within a section. To get into specifics, the data insights section on the GMAT has 20 questions in total. I was able to answer 17 questions, and I got to the screen of the 18th question in the last few seconds of the test. But by then, I had entirely lost track of time, and I did not even realize that I only had a few seconds to select options against the remaining questions in the section. As you can see from this screen, I only got to question 18 when I had 8 seconds left in the data insights section. If I had consciously realized that I was so close to running out of time with 1 minute left, I probably would have just made guesses on questions 17, 18, 19 and 20 to at least finish the section. That strategy would have been more consistent with what you should be doing on the final GMAT exam in order to avoid the penalty of not finishing all questions on a section. Having said that, even among the 17 questions that I actually answered properly in this section, I only got 13 of those right. That's an accuracy of about 70% or so. If I refer back to my notes from day 8, it is consistent with the accuracy I had then. and it is lower than the accuracy I had on day 7 of my practice when I had 94% accuracy on data insights practice questions. Overall, my self-diagnosis on the data insights section seems to be right in that I need to work on both accuracy and velocity on this section. One big learning that I want to call out from this section is the following. My understanding is that the GMAT exam interface will prompt you when you have 5 minutes left in a given section on the test. But far as I understand right now, there is no such prompt at the 1 minute mark. Ideally, if I had had a prompt at the 1 minute mark, I would have realized that I was running out of time and would have made guesses on all the remaining questions. My problem is that I lost a sense of time within the last 5 minutes of the section, and that is why my scores look unusually depressed. Realistically, I think I could have gotten maybe a 60th percentile score on this section if I had just gone ahead and made guesses on those last few questions. If that had been the case, my guess is my overall score would have been somewhere in the low 600s. Unfortunately, there is nothing I can do to change that right now. So I'm just going to work with the score I see at the moment as my baseline score. But I'm also going to track accuracy and velocity separately so that I have some balance in tracking my improvements through my GMAT prep. At some point of time in the coming weeks, I will take another practice exam and I will try not to make this same mistake again so that I get a cleaner bearing on how my GMAT prep is going. For you, I recommend that when you take the practice exam, you watch out for that last 1 to 2 minute mark. And when you have under 1.5 or 1 minute left on a given section, just make guesses on all the remaining questions to ensure that you at least finish the section, just like you should on the final GMAT exam. Once again, I don't want to make excuses for my bad score on this section. This performance just validates the fact that as far as the data insight section is concerned, there is a lot of work that I will need to put in to get to my target 99 percentile score. Finally, let's come to the verbal section. Surprisingly, it is the verbal section that actually turned out to be my ray of hope. I got a 96 percentile score on this section, which is quite good given this was my first practice exam. I was able to finish this section with 3 minutes to spare. I answered 20 out of 23 questions right. That's an accuracy of 87%. My biggest area of improvement on this section also has to do with the interface of the GMAT practice exam. I think I could have used the bookmarks feature of the GMAT Focus Edition much better on this particular section. As I was answering questions on the verbal section, I made no effort to bookmark any question at all, even if I was in two minds about an answer. When I got to the review screen with 3 minutes to spare, I had to go back and refer to my notes and even jump around to various questions from the review screen to figure out if there was any particular question that I wanted to spend additional time on. Eventually, I just decided to skip the review altogether and hit the submit button on the section with about 1.5 or 2 minutes to spare. If this was the final GMAT, I would have still tried to use those 3 minutes better, but because this was a practice exam, I decided to just live with that mistake. Given all of the reasons I just described, and especially taking into account what happened with the data insight section, I think I can round off my baseline score to something around 600. In other words, if I was to give the GMAT Focus Edition without any preparation whatsoever, I would end up getting a 600 on the exam. So now the question is the following. What does that tell me about a reasonable target score that I can realistically go after on the GMAT Focus Edition? And what should my plan of action be to get there? That is going to be the topic of the next video. For now, I am not going to spend any additional time looking at the questions I answered incorrectly on the practice exam. This is an important call out because I do not want to accidentally memorize answers to certain questions from the practice exam. That will enable me to take this practice exam again within a few weeks, coming from a clean memory, and solve all of the questions from scratch to get another estimated score. I recommend that you do the same for any official GMAT practice exam. This will enable you to extract the maximum value out of the official GMAT practice exams. As far as your final GMAT score is concerned, the official practice exams on MBA.com are always going to do a much better job of predicting your overall final GMAT score than any other practice exam you might come across on the market. Most GMAT training providers don't actually do a good job of mimicking the nature of questions that appear on the GMAT, and hence you should do your best to preserve the sanctity of each practice exam you have access to so that you can use it at least 2 to 3 times over the course of your GMAT preparation to track improvements in your performance. So that is all for today. I'm going to take a break from this now. I absolutely need it in order to collect my thoughts on how to proceed with my preparation for the GMAT Focus Edition. Despite my horrible scores on the first practice exam, I still think that I can reasonably aim for at least a 96 percentile on the GMAT Focus Edition, if not a 99 percentile. I'd like to think of it as just a matter of figuring out how I can get there within a reasonable time frame. If you have any questions, click on the Ask Me Anything link in the description. I will also link to a couple of resources which you might find helpful through your GMAT prep. Don't forget to hit subscribe, bell and like if you're in the mood. If you're not, hit the refresh button on this page, let it reload and reconsider your life choices while you're at it. I will see you in the next video.